Sukhinder Singh, CEO of Xero, friend of also 2 decades. I feel like I'm OGing myself to death up here of the Sosa brothers. But we go from Mr. Wonderful to amazing. Sukhinder, we've known each other for 20 years. You were the founder of Yodely, one of the founders of Yodely back in the day. What year, 99-ish?
99-ish.
99-ish,
Yeah.
okay. And now you're CEO of Xero, an $8 billion company?
13.
13, who's counting currencies? And so that's a heck of a journey, and I know it, but I think it'd be great for the audience to hear a little bit about your background, what is Xero, but start with your background, the journey.
Sure, and it's fun to be here. It's my first time at Fintech Meetup, so thanks for having me. As you said, I'm probably too old to count, but was in the Fintech journey early with Yodely, was an investment banker before then in financial services, but made my way to Yodely and was there for about 5 years as the business founders. We established the business model. And grew Yodely, but as many of you know, Yodely was pretty early for its time. It's before online banking or fintech apps really were mainstream. And so you had this backbone awaiting the apps ultimately which would benefit from it. And of course, Yodely's continued and is a vendor to Xero today. I went on to join Google early on, where I ran our APAC and LATAM business, and then founded a couple more companies. As you know, one in e-commerce and one more recently as a talent marketplace, and ultimately ended up as the CEO of StubHub in 2018. So led that business, very different, e-commerce, live sports, live entertainment, ran it for a couple of years before we sold it in 2020, and made my way to Xero, I guess, about 13 months ago. And for those of you who don't know it, it's a global core accounting platform, all cloud-based software, targeting SMBs and their advisors in about 7 different geos directly, and then we have a rest of world product.
Xero's an amazing company. It's been around for obviously a long
17
time.
years.
17 years, right? And you touch so many different areas of fintech. There's the App Store, thousands. I mean,
Yes.
Give a little bit more color on Xero. I know you guys just had your Investor Day. It's a public company, so you can tell us a little bit about the new strategy.
Sure. So Xero, as I said, is a cloud-based core accounting platform. Started in New Zealand, quickly really took its technology to Australia, which was the first kind of flagship large market, and grew from there. And so if you think about what we do, we offer directly to SMBs and advisors, advisors being accountants and bookkeepers, core general ledger software that helps you do everything from ingest your documents to do your monthly bookkeeping to file your taxes. And that is really the flagship kind of hero product for SMBs. And then along that journey, we now attach other services directly. As you said, we just had our Investor Day, and we talked about the 3x3. The 3x3 being the importance of what we call 3 super jobs, core accounting, payroll, and payments. Our SMBs continue to tell us that those are the jobs they want us to do for them. And so, and the 3 markets that we're really focused on are Australia, UK, and US. Those are 3 of our biggest markets. So really we talk about filling in that 3x3, and then as you pointed out, adjacent jobs, things like project management, expense management, CRM, and so on, are in our ecosystem, and increasingly we'll pull some of those adjacent jobs into the direct experience.
And as a CEO, how do you think about your leadership style? You're running this big global company. It's not even based in America. You are. How do you do it? What have you brought to the equation?
Well, first of all, I think people always chuckle. I'm based in San Francisco, but it's directly in between our 2 largest markets, Australia and the UK. I will say everything is 1 flight away. It's all direct. So it happens to be geographically pretty central. And when I was running Google's business, I was running their APAC and LATAM business out of the US. So I am used to this model of sort of trying to cover the world with a lean presence in sort of where you're based, and then really putting the majority of the headcount in your markets. My leadership style, well, I think maybe to just dial back, I think when I came into Xero's in a really strong company, trades on the Australia Stock Exchange, and in fiscal 23, our fiscal 23, we did about 700 million US in revenues. So from here, the journey is about how you become an even higher performing global SaaS business. That's really about running a portfolio of markets, making a decision about what's regional, what's central, bringing in a leadership team for that next journey. And so that's sort of what my leadership journey right now is about. Style, pretty much what you see is what you get. Pretty direct and pretty focused on just putting the value where the business is. So I'm not a big believer in big teams. I'm a believer in lean teams. And and I'd say at this point, it's like precision hiring. Where do we have a gap? Let's fill it. Let's add new capabilities. And Xero already has really an amazing culture and team.
Have you had to make any major changes since you got there? Was it a big strategy change, or?
Well, the first change, which when you're a CEO, is everybody's watching to see what you do first, particularly of a publicly listed company. So when I first got to Xero, within 6 months of my arrival, we did a 15% headcount reduction.
Ouch.
So that was a pretty tough way to start. And like many companies, that was the beginning of 23. We were really looking at, okay, we're growing well, but we're not profitable. And so luckily for us, we have a really strong business model and gross margins, but we needed to right-size the team. So we did a cut over the past half year. We have become profitable, have driven our free cash flow. So that was one kind of major kind of first step. And then as you said, fast forward a year, I just did my investor day. And now it's really just about profitable growth, which is a combination of driving continued subscriber growth, but then also deepening your ARPU and engagement with SMBs. So the strategy is sort of more focused, more disciplined, meant to drive both from a really good starting point.
Shifting a little bit from Xero to a lot of our audiences, founders, new CEOs, existing CEOs that are in a tough environment. You've operated Yodlee in good and bad environments. Other
Yes.
businesses, good and bad. We've been through the dot-com bust, the global financial crisis, COVID. Advice for entrepreneurs going through what people are giving. You're working in an amazing company. You've got cash flow. You're good for them, right?
Right.
But there's a lot of private companies trying to raise capital right now. You've been there, done that, but
advice.
not always been perfect.
Don't wait till you hit the wall to start thinking worst case scenario. I'm always a fan, and people don't like to do it because they go to their boards when they're private and they think their job is only to show the board the best case scenario. I would argue as a CEO, your job is always to show your board worst case, best case, likely case. And I think if more companies did that early, we wouldn't see a lot of companies running into a wall, right? So that's piece one. Piece two is, honestly, I don't care whether you come from a technical background or a non-technical background, learn to sell. Learn to sell. As a CEO, your number one job, right? Sell your vision, sell to customers, sell to the board, sell to the talent you want to hire. So my other piece of advice in good times and bad, sometimes the difference is, between making it and not making it is despite all your best efforts, you're still short on what you need to get profitable. And then you do need to go fundraise, right? But once you go fundraise, everyone's expecting that you already made the obvious changes. If you're waiting to make the obvious changes, it's hard to trust somebody as a CEO. Do that best, worst case planning. And then number three, you need to sell. So if the difference between survival and not is raising that next $10 million, well, you're going to need to sell a vision. And so those are the three things I always think about. And even at Xero, people always ask me, well, how do you think about the business? I'm like, I really want to be a paranoid optimist. I don't want to be a realistic pessimist. I want to be a realistic optimist. And so I'm always playing long-term optimism, short-term, what could go wrong?
When we were talking about your background earlier, right, you've been through startups, failures, startups, and amazing outcomes, but you never really quit. You kept going. Is that part of your DNA? Is that the DNA that you have to have? I mean, what makes you so unique and special and you're never stop?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm unique and special, but I think you hit a lot of it. I mean, look, you and I met 20 plus years ago, and I think what people forget is that it takes a long time to build something great, right? And so I was at Amazon when Amazon attempted its first version of Marketplace in 1997 through a startup I was at. And 3 times it failed, and now look at Amazon, and it's a grocery company, a movie theater, a movie studio, a marketplace, which is almost bigger than their TPV on the first party, and of course, a place you buy all things everywhere. Oh, and by the way, a cloud software provider, one of the biggest in the world.
Don't forget about that.
I mean, you think about your own journey. To you, it probably feels like FT Partners is just getting started, but you're...
It's like Groundhog Day. You do the same
right.
thing every
you
day
just
for
do the same
22
thing
years.
again and again.
Exactly.
So people ask you, what's it like? I'm like, it's like doing the
Yeah.
same thing again and again, just at different scale. And so I think a lot of it is staying in, and a lot of it is being aware and recognizing that if something you're doing, particularly in the industries we live in, happens to work at year 5, consider yourself lucky. If it starts to work at year 7, you suddenly realize that what seems like a long slog to you is just getting started.
Yep.
And so all you're trying to do in that time period is survive and cycle upward, right? So
Yeah.
That's
You
all it
started
is.
in fintech. You're now in fintech again, right?
I can't get away from
You
it.
can't get away from it.
I tried.
Keeps
I went to
bringing
live
us-
sports,
keeps bringing us
entertainment, fashion.
back together. The state of fintech, there's a lot of people that sort of say the market's been tough. Fintech's been even tougher. What is your view of the state of
Fintech?
You're all over it.
Yeah, we're all over it. A few things. So, first of all, I think that I think it's a tough time for fintech in certain categories, as you know. First of all, a lot of fintechs got overfunded. And so, it was growth at all costs. I know that because even at Xero, we had to confront our own version of that. You have other areas of fintech that are very cyclical, right? As you know, lending, it's a hard business to be in right now. I happen to sit on the board of a lending company, so I get to see the cycles there. But there's some things I'm excited about. So excited about embedded finance. I know people are like, well, how true is it? It's very true, and I think for two reasons. Number one, everybody who's a vertical software player or a segment software player, we're a segment software player. We try and provide SMBs with core accounting, but a number of other jobs. So if you're a horizontal player or a vertical software player, you need kind of embedded finance to really make your business model sing. It brings you more revenues, brings you more ARPU, brings you more stickiness, brings you more attach. So the market for embedded finance is truly there, obviously. So it's one of the areas I'm excited about. Last week we just announced another embedded deal on our end with Bill.com. So that's an example of, I think, a green shoot area. It's also, by the way, sometimes what's required in the US to make your business model work, right? Because building a first-party brand, really expensive.
Not easy.
So if you can build economies of scale in distribution, and this is one of the reasons many fintech players pivot to embedded finance. So I think that's an exciting area. You can't really talk about fintech right now without talking about Gen AI, obviously. But also traditional AI. Like, I think a lot of people forget the role of traditional AI. We've long been built on traditional AI to do categorization, document ingestion, reporting, and insights. And Gen AI is about turbocharging that. So I think it's definitely an area to watch. This past week, obviously, Microsoft announced some embedded finance capability in its own Excel products. So I think that's another exciting area. But even in Gen AI, I always come back to, first of all, can you do it with traditional AI, take advantage of it? And number two, where's Gen AI really well suited to solve a new problem for us at Xero? It's really just starting with those conversational interfaces.
There's a lot of folks that are thinking about M&A in the audience and putting Xero aside, but as a CEO, you've been at a bunch of different places. How do you think about, and as a CEO of even a $13 billion company, soon to be, I'm sure, much larger, but think about M&A. Are you waiting for people to come to you? Do you have your strategic roadmap?
I'm curious how you think about M&A as well, because you have a better seat than I do. Maybe I can give you my perspective, but then I'd love to hear from you on what you see out there. Sure. You and I have at least met on a couple of deals recently. Look, for us, and I think this is the important thing, if you're a company that wants to sell to a company like Xero, I think you have to reverse yourself and put yourself in the seat of the opposing party. So for us, there are two categories of interesting deals, and we've always been a systemic M&A user, and we will be again, right? Build, buy, partner. Number one is tuck-ins, right? And there we're looking for ease, team, being best in class at a piece of functionality that we need that we just can't afford to build fast enough. And there it's about ease of integration, and it's about, obviously the team on the other side. You want to get them to stay. And there, quite frankly, what we say to our board is on tuck-ins, I'm not really sure I think about multiples. I think the number needs to be reasonable relative to the capabilities we're buying and how fast they advance us. And it's our job to figure out the monetization strategy, right? Is it bundled? Is it an add-on? Can we just absorb the cost, and say, hey, the cost to build this would be X and the cost to acquire it is Y, and it gives us, a couple-year head start. But I think this is, obviously I'm speaking as a large company now, not as the founder who's had to try and sell companies. But if you think about it when you're trying to sell to someone large, the other way we think about it when you're past that tuck-in stage is, okay, well, how does your multiple compare to our multiple? You know this, multiple math. And so we often see companies that are at, I would say, a middle stage. They have a good product, but they haven't won the category yet. They have good functionality for us, but they walk in the door and they're like, well, I want a 20 times multiple, 30 times, whatever it is.
20 times what?
Right, whatever. And so we have to be disciplined acquirers, right? So we recently laid out with our board, actually, our principles. First of all, we did our learnings on the M&A we've done. When has it worked, when it hasn't worked? And one of the key rules here for us is keep it simple. Keep it simple. It needs to be in the core strategy, doesn't need to be a flyer. And quite frankly, in this environment, I don't think you're going to find a lot of CEOs doing flyers, right? We're in a kind of disciplined, profitable growth cycle. That means CEOs are all thinking about how to spend their capital very judiciously. But secondly, if you walk in and you're not profitable, you're not the clear category leader, you have some good traction, but you walk into an acquiring company and say, well, I want this ludicrous multiple, you just have to be realistic.
Who would ever say that?
I don't know. You certainly don't say that.
No,
of course
never,
you don't.
Never.
Not that you don't make your money selling companies, but I think really just understand on the other side, somebody needs to look at you and say, am I going to pay you a multiple that exceeds my multiple? And so we said to our board is, hey, this is our M&A scorecard. We have some learnings, and how do we rate companies? First of all, what type are they? Tuck in. Category, in both cases, we're looking for category leaders, and this in-between stage is a difficult one. It's a difficult one, admittedly. So, obviously it's easy for me to say this right now as a CEO of a large company versus having been a founder, and as a founder, every day, I've been a founder 3 times, every freaking day thinking about how we're going to survive and thrive. So I have a lot of empathy. But now as potential buyer, mostly I'm thinking about what multiple, how easy are you to integrate, keep it simple, is this team going to stick around, and are they realistic? And I want a very realistic plan. So remember, I started with worst case, likely case, best case. If you think I'm ever going to go into my board and say, this deal works only in a best case scenario, I'm not. That's a great way to lose investor trust. So on the other side, just think about how we think about a deal. If you want to get a deal done, you have to come to the table and understand what that perspective is going to look like.
You mentioned generative AI, right? Are you guys really embracing that for product development? Are you going to reinvent yourself? Because there's a lot of businesses out there that are saying we can do accounting with generative AI and we can generate, you don't need software, blah, blah, blah. How deep are you going to be in
Gen AI?
Gen AI?
So look, we have done a few things. So first of all, we did the obvious things. We launched on our own service and community support site or customer support site. We launched an early version of Gen AI, nice returns. Lots of people are launching chatbots in customer service. Then we launched another chatbot in onboarding, which we know is a user pain, right? It's a user pain to onboard into a product and have to ingest your data. That was another pain point. Last week we announced Jax. Jax is just Ask Xero. It's our generative AI assistant. And we showcased it on a number of use cases on platform, but also off platform, because a lot of SMBs are doing their business in email or in text, right, on WhatsApp or on text messaging. So we want Jax to be able to go with you where you go. We want to be fairly pragmatic. So of course, we're thinking about that, and I mentioned before we already use traditional AI in a lot of our products. Stepping back, I guess our perspective is our job is to keep reducing toil and offering insights so that our customers can spend their time running their businesses, and even the accountants and bookkeepers we serve can move up to a higher value part of the equation. And lots of people will say, well, gosh, are you worried about accountants and bookkeepers going out of business? Most accountants and bookkeepers we know, they are slammed. They are busy. They have more customers than they can take, and if anything, they're shedding the lower value work or sending it to the Philippines or what have you. So they're looking for people like Xero to make their practice more efficient so they can move to the value add. So I don't think we see as doomsday a scenario as others do, but we think our job, of course, is to take advantage of it because what we've provided people is like magical software. Lastly, we think about regardless of what large language model you use, we really think Gen AI and being a leader in Gen AI favors those who have proprietary data sets or data sets on which you can really train effectively large language models. And because we've been the system of record for 17 years for small businesses, we have a lot of financial data that we think we can use to help create some pretty awesome experiences.
We have 30 seconds left. Any final words for the audience about
Look, Fintech will go through its cycles. You and I both know that. We've lived too many to count. As I said, I saw it at Yodlee. I see it every day on the board of a Fintech today, and I see it obviously running Xero. I think the lessons in Fintech are the same as the lessons everywhere, right? As I said, be a realistic optimist. Think worst, medium, and best case scenarios. if you're looking for an exit, think about, not just your shoes, but the multiples on the other side. Mostly it's, you've got to play the long game, even more so sometimes in fintech, where it is so cyclical and tied to the macro. Still a great place to be.
0 seconds. We made it.
We
Zero.
made it. Thank you.
Start with 0, end with 0.
Thank you. Great to see you.